So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We do have a lot of information to share today. And so I will start with some slides. Let me just kind of set up a couple things real quick. Okay, here we go. So welcome. This is, we are going to be talking today about the California Coastal Commission and also the impact that they have on local regulations. So here's what we're going to be discussing today. We are going to be going over a lot. So as Katie said, please jot down your questions in the chat box and I'll try to cover them at the end. I want to note that the topics that we're going to be covering today aren't going to dig down into the weeds. Instead, this is more of an overview of some of the reach that the California Coastal Commission has. We're going to be looking at these issues through a real estate and private property rights lens, and as such, at times the Coastal Commission may not be portrayed in the most positive of light. So first off, I want to be able to ask you all, would you like to take a poll? And of course, this isn't working. Why is this not working now? Oh my goodness, I had this all set up. Okay, anyway, so I really wanted to know from folks, do you love the California Coastal Commission? Do you hate the California Coastal Commission? Or you don't really care, you're just here for the lunch? We were supposed to kind of have some fun with that, but since my technology isn't working, we'll move on. So the Coastal Commission, I want to go over the history, some of the enforcement that the Coastal Commission does, as well as the coastal zone. And this is some background information to kind of give an idea of where Coastal Commission has come from and why they are in our lives as they are. So back in 1972, alarmed that private development was cutting off public access to the shore, Californians rallied to save our coast. They declared by voter initiative that it is the policy of the state to preserve, protect, and where possible, restore the resources of the coastal zone for the enjoyment of the current and succeeding generations. This voter initiative, Proposition 20, was a hard-fought campaign which ultimately led to the passage of the Coastal Act in 1976 and the establishment of the California Coastal Commission. So when we think that this is just something that the legislature just put out there, it actually is by a vote of the people. So the Coastal Act, we refer to this quite a bit. The policies of the Coastal Act constitute the statutory standards applied to planning and regulatory decisions made by the Commission and by local governments. And this is, of course, pursuant through the Coastal Act. As you can see, the Coastal Act covers many issues and pretty much anything that touches the coastal zone. The Commission, so the California Coastal Commission is committed to protecting and enhancing California's coast and oceans for the present and future generations as seen through their statement of principles. It does so through careful planning and regulation of environmentally sustainable development, rigorous use of science, strong public participation, education, and effective intergovernmental coordination. In partnership with coastal cities and counties, the Coastal Commission plans and regulates the use of land and water in the coastal zone. So this is a short 5.5-minute video created by the Pacific Legal Foundation. And I think that this is going to give kind of a really good explanation of the Coastal Commission.
The Coastal Commission has many eyes and ears on the ground. Almost any human activity you can imagine on private property could require a development permit. There's no hiding from the Coastal Commission.
This was the era of music festivals and small bohemian clans camping along the California coast, when beatniks like Neil Cassidy or Jack Kerouac would set up shop on the rocks in Big Sur to write the great American novel.
In the late 60s, environmentalism really came of age. There was a concern in California that the coast was being walled off from the people.
Before long, there was a high-pitched campaign to save the coast. Ads warning of corporate developers bent on destroying the coastline were everywhere, up and down the state. Proposition 20 was passed in 1972 to dramatically limit new private development along California's 1,000-mile coast, and it created America's most powerful land use bureaucracy, the California Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission was primarily the work of hippie activist Peter Douglas, a man who was far more of a spiritual leader than a state bureaucrat.
Radical pagan heretic. That's what I call myself.
The Coastal Commission was inspired by some form of religious zealotry. His view was that property rights should not be a bar to public access of the coast, even on private land. His mission throughout his entire life was to socialize the coastal zone, but just seizing it.
We ought to talk about the coast belonging to all the people.
That kind of ethic that you have to stop anything that touches nature is pervasive with the commission.
Are we as a people wise enough and willing to muster the courage of our convictions to stand firm for what is right?
And he was very clever, and he drafted it in a way that would take the power away from local governments and give it to a pretty much unaccountable body, the Coastal Commission.
And because of how its authority has been interpreted by the courts, it does have effectively unlimited governmental power.
Douglas carried that zeal for Mother Nature in his publicly popular 26-year tenure as head of the commission.
The Schneider case concerned a permit application from the Schneider family to build a single-family home for themselves. And in reviewing the permit, the Coast Commission said, all right, well, we'll let you have your permit, but we're going to radically change the design of your home. We're going to reduce it basically almost by half in terms of square footage, because we think that if you build your home the way you want to, you're going to obscure the view of the mountains behind your home from surfers and kayakers who happen to be along the beach or near the water.
The Coastal Act is very unique when it defines development to mean almost any human activity you can imagine on private property.
The Commission's extreme view of what counts as development was noticeable in 2008, when the small coastal town of Gualala planned to have a 15-minute fireworks display.
Environmental activists grew outraged at the idea that this fireworks display could go forward. And their concern was that the fireworks disturbed birds some ways away that were nesting.
The commission issued a cease and desist order against the local community saying that you need to get a permit because this is considered development.
The state agency forged to stop heartless barons from industrializing California's coast had just canceled America's birthday. The Commission also operates as judge and jury, imposing its will on everyday homeowners. This is the home of the Lent family. It sits a full 20 feet above the beach, and there's no stair or ramp to get down. In 2015, the Commission demanded payments for the estate by the previous owners, claiming it blocked access to the beach, when in reality it blocked pedestrians from falling to their doom. And when the Lent family refused,
later they were told that, well, you're blocking a public access easement by having that area fenced off. They were then fined over $4 million. It's probably the only agency in the entire United States that has the authority not only to adjudicate, but also the authority to impose multi-million-dollar fines without having to go to any court first.
But it's worth wondering how the Commission even finds out about a modest firework display, or a blocked path that no one would ever use.
The Coastal Commission has many eyes and ears on the ground in jurisdictions up and down the coast. Professional activists whose job it is to report and inform on their neighbors. There's no hiding from the Coastal Commission in California.
The unintended consequences of the Coastal Commission's zealous enforcement are that the coastal zone is more and more unaffordable it's very hard to build anything. And as a consequence, people who are not of significant financial means have found the coastal zone to be out of their price range. And the Coastal Commission, unfortunately, doesn't realize that a good reason for that is its own zealous enforcement.
Okay. So I also wanted to point out that I saw this great quote in the New York Times that the commission is the single most powerful land use authority in the United States. So just try to kind of wrap your brain around that. Out of 50 states, this is the single most powerful land use authority out there. And we have it right in our own backyard. So let's talk about the enforcement just a little bit. So the commission's enforcement unit is charged with ensuring that new development is carried out consistent with the Coastal Act. This includes both compliance with permit conditions as well as addressing unpermitted activities and structures. Coastal Act policies and environmental justice principles emphasize the need to fully protect existing public beach areas for public use by all. Next couple slides, we're going to see some examples of what this enforcement looks like. So the first example, we're going to go down to Malibu. In February 2020, the commission approved a consent cease and desist order and administrative penalty directing the Tivoli Cove Homeowners Association Malibu to unblock a commission-required beach access way up and over a revetment, build a previous required public stairway, and remove hazardous boulders and other debris that had fallen onto the beach and into the surf. The design of the original revetment blocked access to the other side of Latago Beach. Decades ago, the commission required a permit condition for a public pathway up and over the revetment, including stairways and access signs, so that the public could reach the other side of Latago Beach. However, the Tivoli Cove HOA failed to maintain one of the stairways, rendering it unusable to the public, and privatized the other stairway for their exclusive use. As boulders from the revetment migrated onto the public beach, the cumulative impact of these violations compounded, resulting in a significant loss of public access. The commission's resolution of this violation included removing the unpermitted development, constructing and maintaining a public beach access path and stairway, removing all concrete blocks, rebar, pipes, boulders, and other debris on the adjacent public beach, regardless of where it actually came from. And the HOA also agreed to provide a beach shower, drinking fountain, benches, and interpretive signs, and they are going to maintain them and provide them for the public at their own expense. Next example, we're going to go to Newport Beach. In June 2020, the commission issued consent orders to the city of Newport Beach and dozens of beachfront homeowners to resolve numerous longstanding coastal access violations consisting of private encroachments on public beach. Homeowners had essentially extended their yards, including landscaping, hardscaping, outdoor furniture, and other amenities onto public land, including sensitive dune habitat, claiming it as private space. Through the commission's consent orders, the city and homeowners collectively agreed to remove all unpermitted encroachments from the beach, restore native habitat, and remove any future encroachments. The homeowners agreed to pay in aggregate an administrative civil penalty that totals just over $1.7 million to improve public access opportunities and restore coastal habitats. Our last example is going to be in Pacific Palisades. In November 2020, the commission approved a consent order involving the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. To replace 220 power poles near Pacific Palisades, the utility had conducted extensive grading without a coastal development permit, damaging sage scrub and chaparral habitat in the Santa Monica Mountains without a permit. It's important to note, because you can see on the one side the red line of where that area is, that the Coastal Act protects scenic and visual qualities of coastal areas and limits landform alterations, which is why this is part of the coastal zone. In addition to installing erosion control measures and implementing a long-term monitoring plan, LADWP is going to restore the 9 acres that it bulldozed within the coastal zone and the 17 acres outside of the zone. And the city is going to pay $1.9 million in fees. These are highlighted because they go from a, yeah, I can understand that. I can see why that's an enforcement issue, to how is it that the Coastal Commission can go all the way up into the mountains when it isn't directly next to the beach? So let's go into the coastal zone itself. The coastal zone, I keep mentioning the coastal zone, obviously. This is at the crux of everything that the Coastal Commission does. The coastal zone is the land and water area of the state of California from the Oregon border down to Mexico. And it extends seaward to the state's outer limit of jurisdiction, including all offshore islands. And it extends inland, generally 1,000 yards from the mean high tide line of the sea. In significant coastal estuaries, habitats, and recreational areas, it extends inland to the first major ridge line paralleling the sea, or 5 miles from the mean high tide line of the sea, whichever is less. In developed urban areas, the zone generally extends inland less than 1,000 yards. So we're going to actually take a look at our local area and see where our coastal zone is. So that's when folks ask you, so where is the coastal zone? A lot of people sometimes are like, let me really look at the map, because as you can see, there's many different definitions depending on the specifics within that area. So here's the Santa Barbara County coastal zone itself, all the way from the northern to the southern portion. As you can see, there's quite a bit of area in which it goes inland. The city, so we're going to start in the south coast. So here's the city of Goleta, which obviously includes the airport, but that's part of the city of Santa Barbara. This is the city of Santa Barbara's coastal zone. As you can see, it kind of runs along the freeway and then through Cliff Drive, or not Cliff Drive. Through Cliff Drive and on out. Here's Montecito and Summerland, where the coastal zone is considered here. And here's Carpinteria. The entire city of Carpinteria is in the coastal zone. So let's get into the meat of the local issues and regulations. Remember, this is an overview, and these policies took years to make. So I can't get into the weeds on these, but it's going to give you a good idea of what's happening. So I wanted to kind of point out 2 issues that the Coastal Commission just worked on. Environmental justice is defined as the fair treatment of people of all races, cultures, and incomes with respect to the development, adoption, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. In 2016, the governor signed AB 2616, which amended the Coastal Act and gives the Commission new authority to specifically consider environmental justice when making permit decisions. And this new law adds another layer to the power that the Coastal Commission already has. I also want you to be aware that there was a bill last year that was passed to create the Hollister Ranch Public Access Interagency Working Group to create coastal access at Hollister Ranch. This has been a long fought battle between the property owners and the Coastal Commission, and Senator Lamone popped in and created this working group in order to come up with some compromises on coastal access. So sea level rise, we've been hearing a lot about sea level rise. Wanted to go over kind of what the Coastal Commission has been doing, as well as locally what we've been doing here. So the adopted statewide planning principles for aligned state action are consistent and complementary to the Coastal Commission's ongoing work to address sea level rise and align state actions in 6 main areas. They want to develop and use the best available science, build coastal resilient partnerships, improve resiliency communications, support local leadership, strengthen coastal resilience, learn from implementing coastal resilient projects. Now, I want you to kind of note yet again the support local leadership, because we're going to touch on that in just a minute. They're also they worked on a joint statement of shared sea level rise principles, which identify a set of guiding principles and acknowledges the challenges, opportunities, and necessary actions associated with proactive and effective sea level rise adaptation for California's coastal communities. This isn't going to resolve every area of disagreement between the Coastal Commission and the local jurisdictions, but it acknowledges that the Coastal Commission is working with the locals, not always against them. And this is really important because there have been a lot of locals who don't like what the Coastal Commission is trying to push on various policies. And the Coastal Commission is realizing that, and therefore is actually taking some steps to, let's say, even the playing field a little bit. The last item that I wanted to talk about in regards to the Coastal Commission is the sea level rise adaptation guidance for residential development. This plan is still in the draft process, and it's been in draft process for many years. SBAOR, as well as Smart Coast California, we are concerned about it because it has the definition of an existing structure of anything being built prior to January 1, 1977. We're going to come back to that date, but that's a very, very important date for everyone to know. This adaptation plan is proposing requiring homeowners to remove existing functioning shoreline protections, would limit the ability of a homeowner to update, redevelop, or expand an existing home. It would mandate participation in a managed retreat program that would force the removal and relocation of houses that are still habitable along the coast. And it would use overlay zones and the imposition of land use restrictions not directly relevant to an existing and immediate hazard. And it would create government imposed deed restrictions. Locally, we have a lot of activity pertaining to climate change and sea level rise. These plans are really starting to heat up right now, and they're important because they're incorporated in any land use decision. In the county right now, we have what's called One Climate, and that is an umbrella with 4 different aspects under it. It has the safety element update, the climate action plan, the active transportation plan, and the community choice energy. That service is actually going to begin January of this year. But these are super important because with the land use decisions that come through them, they are going to be added, mandated, required, potentially incentivized throughout all the county land use planning. Goleta has theirs, and it was done through their hazards, vulnerability, and fiscal impact report, which was done back in 2015. Santa Barbara just adopted their sea level rise plan just last month. They need to still go to the Coastal Commission in order to get it approved, and that would mitigate the impacts of sea level rise. It would have a phased approach in how to monitor and deal with sea level rise occurring, as well as have some recommendations depending on when these different tiers are triggered. And Carpinteria has an interim sea level rise guideline, which was adopted in 2020, and they're still working on their LCP updates, which we'll talk about in a minute. So local coastal programs, or known as LCPs, there's going to be a lot of acronyms. So hopefully everyone will be able to stay on board with these. Local coastal programs, also known as LCPs, are local blueprints for the Coastal Act policies, implementing statewide resource protection policies, including sea level rise, in a locally specific context. Although certified LCPs allow cities and counties to assume more local control through the issuance of their own coastal development permits, some jurisdictions have not completed theirs. That would mean that the commission would remain the permitting authority, and that means you have to go through their entire process. We are lucky in that we do, within the South Coast, we have our LCPs all in place. Santa Barbara is updating just updated theirs in 2019. Goleta is beginning their update. Carpinteria began theirs in 2018, and they're just taking a really long time. And then the county adopted theirs in 2018, but it still needs to be certified by the Coastal Commission. So let's go into short-term rentals. There have been a lot of questions about short-term rentals, coastal zone, inland, what is going on with them and in certain areas. So we're going to go over these with what the Coastal Commission says on short-term rentals and then in the various areas. So some would argue that private residences should remain solely for the exclusive use of those who reside there in order to foster neighborhood stability and residential character, as well as to ensure adequate housing stock in the community. Others would argue that vacation rentals should be encouraged because they often provide more affordable options for families and other coastal visitors of a wide range of economic background to enjoy the California coastline. In addition, vacation rentals allow property owners an avenue to use their residence as a source of supplemental income. The Coastal Commission has submitted a memo back in December of 2016, basically saying that vacation rental regulations in the coastal zone have to occur within the context of the LCP or authorized through a CDP, which a CDP is a coastal development permit. The regulation of short-term rentals does represent a change in the intensity of use and of access to the shoreline, and therefore it would constitute development, which would apply to the Coastal Act. So therefore an LCP must be applied. The Coastal Commission does not believe, though, that the regulation outside of the LCP would have an outright ban of vacation rentals. They do not believe that this is legally enforceable in the coastal zone. And the commission highly encourages locals to pursue regulations that are common sense and that are able to still allow coastal or short-term rentals in the coastal zone. So the county. We have inland regulations that are already in place. In the coastal zone, their ordinance actually got shot down by the Coastal Commission, which means that the supervisors had to come back and direct staff to draft regulations of short-term rentals in the coastal zone. Right now, this is all in a draft form, which could include possibility of having it be a primary residence, have an annual business license, have an overlay, monitor the concentration in certain areas, grandfather historic TOTs, or even have a cap on it. So once we know more, we will definitely let the membership know. City of Goleta, we worked with the City of Goleta on having regulations that were smart, that were common sense. And these we've talked about ad nauseum pretty much in the past. And we do have this information on our website. The City of Santa Barbara. City of Santa Barbara is interesting. So their short-term rental coastal regulations states that a short-term rental is a non-residential use. And therefore, what you need to do is that you need to convert a single residential unit to a short-term rental, which means you actually need to convert it from a single family to a hotel use. When you do that conversion, that means that you are going to have to not only deal with growth management program, parking, setbacks, tenant displacements. You also are going to have to deal with ADA compliance because now technically you are a hotel. The city right now is in the middle of a lawsuit still on this issue in determining what they actually can and cannot do. The reason why this has been so up in the air is because the city does not technically have a short-term rental ordinance. They have just been working and they have been enforcing what they've had in the past, which means anything under 30 days is considered a hotel use. The city of Carpinteria has their short-term rental coastal regulations, which passed a couple of years ago. You are allowed to do them in certain areas. And in certain areas, there are a max number of allowed vacation rentals. This is done through a lottery system, which is usually done, I believe it's in October. And that's only if there are permits available in those areas. They are non-transferable when you go to sell the property. So let's move on to the other big issue is ADUs. So the Coastal Commission has actually released several memos because the ADU laws keep changing. This is the latest memo from April of last year. And basically, the Coastal Commission is saying that the Coastal Act does not exempt local governments from complying with state and federal law with respect to providing low and moderate income housing, replacement housing, relocation benefits, or any other obligation related to housing imposed by existing law or any other law hereafter enacted. The Coastal Act requires the Coastal Commission to encourage housing opportunities for low and moderate income households. New residential development must be located within, contiguous with, or in close proximity to existing developed areas able to accommodate it, or in other areas where development will not have significant adverse effects on the coastal resources. The creation of new ADUs in existing residential areas is a promising strategy for increasing the supply of lower cost housing in the coastal zone in a way that may be able to avoid significant adverse impacts on coastal resources. The Coastal Commission issued this memo to provide general guidance to local government with fully certified LCPs. The Coastal Commission is generally responsible for the Coastal Act review of ADUs in certain areas that aren't subject to the LCPs. So locally, what we're dealing with is the county has implemented a streamlined interim process for their ADUs and JADUs. JADUs are junior ADUs. This process is going to remain in effect until the county can adopt their new ADU ordinances. And they are requiring building permits, and it's a streamlined process. And the coastal zone ADU ordinance is going to remain in effect until the Coastal Commission certifies the county's new ADU ordinance. So it's all going to be meshed together. GLEDA, the application process is already in place. It's the same for the coast as well as inland. City of Santa Barbara, they are working on theirs. They've actually worked on theirs, and they are hoping to get it certified by the Coastal Commission, hopefully sometime this year. And Carpinteria, they're actually not adhering to current state regulations because they believe that since they are fully in the coastal zone, they therefore don't need to adhere to any of the ADU regulations from the states. This has been debated up and down. The city has been put on notice that they cannot do that. And so they are looking at a release date of a new ADU ordinance, April, May, to start that process. So rebuilding and renovating after a disaster. So this really comes down to that draft residential adaptation policy guidance that we had talked about earlier. So what's interesting is that there's current regulations that basically say if you're doing the same exact thing in the same exact place, you're not changing anything, you're conforming to your existing local zoning requirements, you can rebuild. However, when we're talking about the Coastal Commission, nothing is really that easy. And so what the Coastal Commission is trying to push is managed retreats, having a cumulative definition, which means that alterations that exceed a 50% or more of a major structural component, it would trigger new development versus redevelopment. And that will be cumulatively done since 1977. So say you did 20% in 78, you did 14 or 15% in 83, and then what is that for 35? So then you decide to do your other 15, you were going to do 20% now, you would exceed that cumulative definition of that 50%. We are working really hard on making sure that locals do not have that definition. And then also it would mean that it's also instituting the rebuilding restrictions. They're hoping to put them in now because they're trying to say, oh, well, if we put them in now, we're giving everyone enough time to know that this is going to happen. And so people can adjust to the disaster before it actually strikes. Disclosures, your favorite thing in the whole entire world, the disclosures. So we have asked the SBAOR Standard Forms Advisory Committee to take a look at this issue for sea level rise specifically. And we asked them to write a standard form on this that could be used across the state. The reason for this is because the local jurisdictions were being pushed by the Coastal Commission in order to create disclosures or programs like disclosures that would address sea level rise. And so we just got the word that Standard Forms approved addressing this issue. They are still in the drafting stage of this. So be on the lookout. I'm hoping in the next release maybe that we'll be having this new disclosure. I do not know where it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be a standalone or if it's going to be within an existing, I'm not sure, but we'll hopefully know more at a later date. In the meantime, I would suggest that you check with your broker about the risk management aspect of all of this. And as a suggestion, I am not an attorney. I just play one on TV, that you make sure that you, the buyer, the seller, are disclosed that any local regulations or websites to get more information. Basically flood them with information, and therefore that will protect you all. So we have major concerns through Smart Coast California. The three major concerns at the moment are the existing development date, which we have spoken about, that's at 1977 date. Regulatory takings, which basically means that it's prohibiting property owners of protecting their property. And therefore, if they can't protect it, they're doing it without just compensation. And managed retreat, so basically relocating or abandoning development along the shore. I had another poll, but it's not working, so sorry. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about Smart Coast California. So Smart Coast California is a brand new 501c6 that's created, and we cover 29 Association of Realtors up and down the state. And our Smart Coast board involves people from all the way up from Humboldt all the way down to San Diego. I'd like to do a shout out to the Vice President of Smart Coast California, Thomas Schulteis, as well as our alternate on there, Raina Stapleman. They have been great in getting this organization up and off the ground and running. So what is Smart Coast California? Smart Coast California, as I said, was created actually by realtors. And it is a 501c6 that is advocating for the collaborative stewardship of the coast, the special place where the land and the water meet, dedicated to community sustainability, property rights, and the environment. So let's go into those policy issues again. So managed retreat. Managed retreat can be a common sense land use practice where practical, especially in rural areas where existing structures can be relocated further inland when they're demolished and rebuilt, and you never need a shoreline protection device. But this shouldn't be implemented in, say, more urban areas, especially where there's not a deep enough parcel to relocate the development, and where property owners need to be allowed to defend their property from wave attack. Existing development, yet again, that 1977 date, right? This is just going to be burned into your brains at this point. Under the Coastal Act, the existing structures are entitled to develop a shoreline protection device when threatened by wave action. Defining structures existing on or before January 1, 1977 is unjustified based upon legislative analysis. Importantly, there have been 2 efforts to amend the Coastal Act by the legislature to change the definition of existing development to mean before 1977. There was one bill in 2002 and another bill in 2017, and both of those bills failed. The Coastal Commission cannot simply just write law or regulations and refer to this date in the proposed statewide interpretations for the sea level rise, because it does not constitute law. Furthermore, it would be inappropriate to utilize amendments in the LCPs as a vehicle to impose a new interpretation with consequences locally and statewide. Last policy, regulatory takings. Some local jurisdictions and the Coastal Commission are contemplating regulations that would prohibit a property owner from armoring their home or business to provide protection from rising seas and storm waves. This raises serious concerns pertaining to a regulatory taking without just compensation. And as such, regulation must comport with the constitutional principles and the Coastal Act itself. There's 3 different areas in which the regulatory takings has been defined. So you have the 5th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which is the takings clause. Basically, it says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. The Constitution of the State of California, Article 1, Declaration of Rights, Section 1, says that it must be possessing and protecting property. And the California Coastal Act itself says it can exercise their power to grant or deny a permit in a manner which will take or damage private property for public use without the payment of just compensation therefore. The government can't require property owners to allow natural hazards to destroy their property for public benefit without just compensation. It's the hallmark of responsible government to ensure that it can pay for which it legislates, and basic fairness dictates that they have the funding mechanism in place so that when the need arises from regulations, property owners can be dealt with in a seamless and fair fashion. Said funding mechanism should be in place before the adoption of any regulation that will preclude an owner from protecting their property under the auspices of managed retreat. So we have actually been tracking up and down from Smart Coast, California, all the recent sea level rise and local coastal plan efforts. So as you can see, these are different priorities. This is priority 1 that's going to be coming up very soon in these various areas. Here's priority 2 and priority 3. The other thing is that this is a big focus at the state legislature. I know these are kind of hard to see, but these are 6 bills that have been introduced so far on sea level rise. And as you can see, they go anywhere from creating a climate adaptation center and creating networking on that, all the way to having a potential revolving loan program in order to pay for those quote unquote takings, and being able to do some economic analysis on sea level rise. So with that, I'd like to invite you, if you're interested more in Coastal Commission issues, in having some information sent to you from Smart Coast, California, you can join our contact list. And this is a QR code that you can use to join our contact list. Check out the website. Also on our website at SBAOR.org, we also have our information under government information. And with that, I think I'll turn it back to you, Katie.